Welcome to today's episode of the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. Those About to Die is Peacock's formal proclamation that it will no longer stand on the sidelines as Disney, Apple, Amazon, and Netflix race to produce the first billion-dollar budget show. So far this year, The Acolyte has $180 million that was invested into that first season. 3 Body Problems, $160 million. Fallout was $153 million. Shohei Ohtani earned a contract of $700 million. And Those About to Die is at $140 million.
So that's the lowest out of all the ones that you mentioned.
Anything over $100 million, and I don't think you can call it low.
Well, it's weird how NBC is trying to give us the next best medieval show.
I don't know if that's what they're doing. I think it's a competitive draw to try to make the next Game of Thrones, to make the next Spartacus. Like, this does feel like the Starz version of Spartacus, which back in the day, 2010, $2 million an episode was daunting. And
well, you're saying Spartacus. I was thinking like also Rome. You could throw the Winter King in there. The
Rome
Tudors.
Is hugely popular as a series. I never saw Rome. I only saw Spartacus. But like Rome is well liked. And I think people are very upset that HBO canceled it after 2 seasons. Or maybe
it only
even
ran 2
season.
seasons.
Oh, yeah. They canceled it early. But the series description on this one would fit that of just say Gladiator, the movie, right?
Yes.
The series title and the description both say it chronicles the world of gladiators in ancient Rome.
Mm-hmm.
However, having both watched the first episode, Rise or Die, we can attest that the summary holds a lot to be desired because there's chariot racing, there's succession planning, there's random people getting murdered and having sex and stuff, but I didn't see any gladiators, so to speak, having any fights.
Not yet. The racing reminded me of Ben-Hur.
Yeah, it should. It was filmed in the same production studio or place in Rome. Yeah.
Wait,
it
really?
was one of the reasons why I think Anthony Hopkins wanted to join and go do it because he had enjoyed working there before.
Well, it makes a lot more sense because the only time we see a lot of the characters together is leading up to this chariot race, and obviously Ben-Hur is most famous with its chariot racing.
Yeah, as far as timing is concerned, you had Spartacus, which was in the BC era, and then you had Caesar, Caesar was around at the time of Spartacus. I think Rome dealt with Caesar's ascension, and then Ben-Hur would have been after that. And I think this is between where Ben-Hur took place and Gladiator. The 2001 movie, which is funny because they're based off the same book, not Ben-Hur and Gladiator, but this and Gladiator.
Oh,
yes.
So is this like a retelling
Those About
of
to
it?
Die? Those About to Die is a book written by Daniel Pratt Mannix IV, and we will talk about him soon. He's got the craziest Wikipedia story they've ever read, and so I'm just going to read the synopsis to that when we get to him. But let's talk more about this episode.
This takes place after Nero has taken his life. 4 emperors wanted the throne, and then we skip to Vespasian winning.
Yes.
And this is and he's like making this Flavian amphitheater.
He's like like a Colosseum. He's like the first general to become emperor or something, and he's kind of kept things at peace. There's a bunch of factions floating around and a lot of storylines. One of the main ones, Tenax, right?
Yeah.
He kind of exists on the ether because he's trying to create his own faction while running the entire gambling operation. And
they throw so much at you.
Yeah.
6 different stories mashed into one, and they introduce all of them within the timeline of 15 minutes. It felt so rushed because we do start with Tenax. He
runs
just
location. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and he kills people who can't pay their debt. So then we get introduced to him. Then we also just have Rome as a character in of itself because much like Divergent and Hunger Games, they have their own factions. 4 to be precise. You have green, white, red, and then blue factions. Then the first one or the next one is Vespasian.
That sounds like a game of Capture the Flag, by the way.
Yes, right.
Or like my senior year, you know how in high schools they give every year a color? I remember throughout, it used to be like white and blue for sophomore and freshman, but then those were like gang color related too much in the place that I was. So they had to switch the colors.
Well, the strange thing is they don't define what each color stands for. If they did, I didn't catch it because I didn't get which one was like the most powerful.
Location.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Based on where they are.
Yes.
And then Vespasian, he's the king of Rome.
Houses.
I think the best storyline was this one because you also have Domitian. He's a politician. That's his youngest, and Titus, who is a general. And it seems like this king is actually for the people, which is not something that you usually see in these.
Where do you get that from? Just the fact that he's not cruel?
Well, no, he's entirely against the people, the faction leaders who are running this thing. He's like, no, I'm wanting to build this theater for the people.
Oh, you're saying that part of it. But then later on, so like he builds the entire Coliseum, the place where they're going to run these events,
Yeah.
and the people start to rebel in the middle of the day, just having a grayed out riot, forcing the king to, or yeah, forcing the guy to then call his first race, right?
Yeah, it was an
Days
uprising.
early.
It was uprising over no grain, and I think that it was about a day earlier. That was a different
But
storyline that I had pegged.
he's like manipulating them basically. He's saying, "Hey, look over here," while everybody's distracted trying to like take down the empire.
Well, yeah, I was going
So
to.
things are not at rest, is what I'm trying to say. Things are messy.
Well, yeah, because you also have 3 Spaniards who are selling horses,
Yeah.
trying to make their way. You then cut to North Africa, where siblings Jula and Ara are taken to Rome as slaves because they killed a creepy Roman soldier.
That's where I think the Gladiator storyline is going to come into play, because you have the son of the sisters who, blah, 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 blah. I think he's going to become one of the gladiators, and his family is just going to be surrounding him.
But that was sick
'Cause he-
storylines.
Yeah.
In the timeline of 15 minutes, way too much. Like, we were blowing past so much of what happened because it seemed like Tanax was going to be the main character of the series, but then he like
sort of
goes
is.
away. Well, it's hard
He
to
is
tell
more than
who
Anthony
is.
Hopkins.
It's hard to tell not only who the villains are, because there are some people who are outright the villains, like Domitian, but then like Anthony Hopkins, you just don't know.
Okay, so Domitian, he is the son who is likely to become emperor, but he also has a brother who's older, who is the direct descendant. However, he has his own clouded mind thoughts.
I
Right now.
actually
But
like.
you should recognize.
Yeah, Domitian was probably one of my favorite characters just because he plays such a different character in Sex Education.
Well, not only Sex Education, he was also in Masters of the Air, where his friend
Right.
dies and he's captured by the Germans. He's also was one of the main characters in The Irregulars, where he played kind of a crazy looking dude. So this guy's got some acting
I thought that
chops.
his acting actually in the series was probably the best out of any of the people there.
I always enjoy Iwan Rheon. In fact, I feel like the big flaw in the series. So I'm going to go through my thoughts real quick. Is that I thought the best scene, even though it was CGI and green screen and stuff, was the lead up and the actual race itself.
Right.
It reminded me like
Agreed.
I was watching Ford versus Ferrari. Like it felt like he was literally going around to the carriages and being like, "That's not the one I want." And like one of the science dudes was like, "But we outfitted it so it would be the fastest speed and stuff." And he's like, and he would have died if he used that one because someone was setting him up.
Right.
So I like that scene. I also felt bad for the guy who bet his shares, his last shares, his wife's shares. And then Iwan Rheon's character,
He rigs it. He rigs the race.
yeah, he pulls a sting operation, and he gets the guy's shares so that then he can make his own faction. But I feel like ever since Game of Thrones, not Misfits, but Game of Thrones, Iwan Rheon, they've been trying to give him a show where he can play the
where he
Ramsay
can play evil. Yeah.
type-ish villain without going as full out as Ramsay was. They did the same thing with Robert Sheehan when they gave him Umbrella Academy from playing Nathan on Misfits to then playing Klaus,
Yeah.
right? I think with Iwan Rheon, such a good actor, able to like play that line where like you're still rooting for him, even though he's doing these dastardly things, but he's still like rootable for, because at least there's like a moral center behind this guy's character. And if they had just stuck with that, I feel like this show would have been a lot better. But like with Inhumans, it's an ensemble cast. I think it gets spread out way too much. Basically like Taylor Kitsch as well, when they started trying to give him movie roles and they just weren't doing enough to sell his acting ability, it just didn't work.
I just feel like the show is trying to be so expansive and trying to be like Game of Thrones, but it just didn't have enough of the character development. Like, I didn't really care about any of the characters, even Iwan Rheon's character. I just felt like
when he was on screen, though, it felt like the story was moving at least.
Agreed, but like, why did we have to have this North Africa storyline with the siblings?
Too many people have voiced that same opinion.
I mean, it was so boring to watch. There was nothing to it, and I liked seeing Kwame's lion scene, because the lions, I'll give the show this, looked real, looked way better than like the Walking Dead Shiva lion. Like,
it's been 10 years.
The CGI
was a tiger. I think, right?
Yeah, and it looked cool. But I mean, like, aside from that, I think we're past the point where medieval shows just have to have cool cinematography and costumes. You have to actually have characters along with it, and this just did not. I know that you said that you, Rufus, you felt bad for placing the bet and losing all the money, but that's all we know about him. That's like our introduction to him.
I know. I didn't feel bad for him at first. It was seeing him lose where I was like, I was rooting for the sting to work. And then once it had, I saw his wife look at him, and it was just like, oh man, because she knew. And then I realized he wasn't going to be smug about it. He's just a gambling addict. And back in the day, they just didn't treat them.
And I actually looked it up because I was wondering how, I'm sure there's things that they decided to exaggerate, but how historically accurate it was, because it seems like always these shows have kind of the gay couples. Apparently, back in Rome in the when this took place, that was open, so that was actually correct about that. So
Yeah, if you'd seen Spartacus, you wouldn't have to look that up. You'd kind of
well, it just
know it
seems like
already.
even with Game of Thrones and Heart of the Dragon, they're always so open about it. And back then, I wasn't really sure how people felt about it.
Yeah, well, there's that, and also race-related issues were not as acerbic as they are even later on. The Romans had their issues, but like I think it was more again corruption and religious-oriented issues. The pilot, it reminds me of something. I just want to see if you agree. The pilot couldn't find the balance between action and political drama. It lacks scope. It was supposed to be an epic fantasy, but the production felt small, particularly for its steep budget and exotic locations.
I was gonna say that, yeah.
But
In
but
terms
what
of
I'm
how it felt small, it didn't seem like it was that big scale.
when I say epic fantasy, though, I'm referring to the Game of Thrones unaired pilot, which cost an exorbitant amount of money, and they filmed it in a place that was very expensive as well. But they went back to HBO and begged to be able to redo
Because
it.
it looked like LARPing,
I
right?
think, well, no. What I just said was it lacked the scope,
I know.
even though
Yeah.
it was like, so that's what I feel like this could have gone, and maybe if it got a chance to redo itself a little bit, it would have also come back better. But it was messy. There were so many things going on. They should have kept just to a straight narrative and trusted the story itself to kind of guide its way over time. Instead of introducing everybody in the cast immediately, because that's just overwhelming. And then as the story goes on, it just becomes boring as you're watching these different threads.
It just felt, even when I watched the trailer, like this was going to be a shameless ripoff of Game of Thrones. And the intro didn't help because it was also just blood running through this 3D Rome replica,
Yeah.
which is just the same exact intro as Heart of the Dragon.
At this point, though, like every intro that we see is kind of a direct correlation with others. A lot of them trust the same companies to make them. And so the same companies kind of do the same thing. Ever since the Daredevil one, we've seen like 50 different versions of that same thing. So that's where I always go to in my head when I see that. Also, this is another review. And it was actually for Spartacus, so I'll just tell you that. It was pulpy, violent, gratuitous sex, exaggerated dialogue. It was a 300 ripoff. The first episodes were admittedly terrible. It was produced with $2 million, very expensive to start with, but people fell in love with it over time.
It got like a huge following, right?
It started off where people were watching it just to laugh at it. But then somewhere around in the middle of the first season, it found its footing and made you care about characters who were, again, doing exaggerated dialogue and stupid things and cast like obscenely, like they went to gladiator school so they could all have like hugely ripped bodies and stuff like that. And so it was insane, but at the same time, the story fleshed out after a while. My fear was doing what they did here, where it just feels like too much introduction at the beginning, is that they're not going to be able to follow that same path.
Also, with things like the sex, it felt like it was just thrown in here to be like, oh, let's get more viewers by being shocking, but it's not that shocking
Well,
anymore.
the brother having the sex, the brother having sex just reminded me of Tyrion being caught in the first episode.
Right.
And then there was another person, the chariot rider, right? What's his name?
Scorpus?
Yes, Scorpus, who is the most gladiator-ish from like Spartacus, if you were to compare any character.
I think he's
having sex with whose wife? Like one of the higher ups?
Yeah, and it was supposed to be. It reminded me a lot of Game of Thrones.
Again,
it always
his
did.
plot line
It
was
always
the
goes
most
back.
Spartacus-ish.
Well, he's going to be the protagonist. Like, he's going to be the one that you root for, because even at the end of the episode, he realizes that the race was rigged, and there's nothing really against him aside from maybe who he's having sex with that you're not supposed to find too unlikable. Like, he doesn't have to. He doesn't.
He's kind of like Gannicus from Spartacus. Let me play a little game with you. So this is like to show that the series had a bunch of strangely creative minds that also have a lot of contradiction when it comes to their filmography. And so actually, let me start off with how the Wikipedia goes for the writer. because the writer's thing is
Yeah, you
nuts.
said it was crazy.
Daniel Pratt Mannix IV. He lived from 1911 to 1997. He was an American writer, a journalist, a photographer, a sideshow performer, as in like he swallowed swords and ate fire and stuff, a
Okay.
stage magician, an animal trainer, and a filmmaker. One of his two best-known works is the 1958 book Those About to Die, which was republished in 2001, I assume after Gladiator, as The Way of the Gladiator. And then that was also the inspiration, obviously, for Ridley Scott's film Gladiator, which came out in 2000, and the TV drama Those About to Die, which we're reviewing right now. The other is the 1967 novel. Do you want to take a guess? You'll never get it.
I don't know.
The Fox and the Hound, which was
Wait,
adopted,
the Disney movie?
which was loosely adapted into an animated feature by Walt Disney Productions in 1981. The story is a lot darker.
It's like the Jungle Book in that way.
Yes, exactly. Now, I read more about this guy. Apparently, he like watched one of the most famous snake handlers back in the day die because he was taking a photo of them, and they were petting a cobra, and then they got bitten at the same time.
Was it a photo that was taken like right before it happened?
One of the things said that the flash is what caused the snake to bite. The other one just says that it nabbed her finger, and then they waited like 2 hours while the ambulance got there and everything, and she died because they didn't have anti-venom. She never kept the anti-venom. She was very cavalier with her thing, but that's just a small segment of like his entire thing. He comes from a big family where he would like get these exotic animals in his house, and he would raise them as a kid, and then he would write books about them, and then he decided to join a circus, and that's where he just I mean, the guy's life is a whole thing. Robert Rodat. So now we're going to get into the game where I give you 4 different people and what the contradiction is between their like good and bad filmography, and you got to tell me which one's fake. All right. So there's Robert Rodat, who wrote half of the episodes, including the pilot, Rise or Die. And Rodat also wrote Saving Private Ryan in 1998, The Patriot in 2000, and Thor the Dark World and 10,000 BC.
And 10,000 BC. Those final two
so it's the contradiction. You got the good and you got the not so good. All right. Show creator Jerry Sardovsky also worked on Spartacus, Vikings, but he got his start as a show creator in 2006. This is the contradiction. Ugly Betty, where he ran the last 2 seasons.
I mean, Ugly Betty was liked, wasn't it?
Yes, but how is it related to? Okay. And then German film director Roland Emmerich, right? Independence Day, The Day After Tomorrow, The Patriot, 2012, Godzilla, but the 1998 version, White House Down, and Moonfall.
The Patriot keeps on coming up, it seems like. He came up in the first one and the third one.
Yes, because it would be the fact that Roland Emmerich would have worked with the writer. The director and the writer would have worked together.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. And then the last one is Peter Travers, who's the visual effects supervisor, also supervised Guardians of the Galaxy, Watchmen, pretty good, Ghostbusters 2016, not as well liked, and Moonfall, once again.
Okay, so, and you're saying one of these
is completely fictitious as far as,
I would believe that the Patriot people work together. Peter Travers, I heard the name before, and I think he did do the final one, so that's why.
So you're saying the show creator, Jerry Sardovsky.
Yeah.
They don't have a listed show creator. There is no person.
There's no
such person, Jerry Sardovsky. I think it was attached with Roland Emmerich at the very beginning. Roland Emmerich has already almost confirmed that there will be a season 2 of this thing. And so he seems to be the closest related to
how are they able to get, I understand prior source material, but they were able to get Anthony Hopkins, who is a great actor. They were able to get all the money they did, and this is the result that they gave us?
Well, so what is your rating for the show?
I would be giving it a 5 out of 10. There's potential, but there are so many other shows you could watch. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not awful to the point where it's just unwatchable. It just feels like you have to watch maybe the second half of the episode before it starts to smooth out a little bit.
Well, it's just build up for the horse race. Yeah. And then when you get the horse race, again, it's cool, but it's like that's just kind of it. The final 10 minutes are people kind of the fallout of that. and I just feel like there's not enough intrigue for people to keep watching. The whole series was released in one day, wasn't it?
Yes.
I think so. So it's like I feel like that's almost lacking confidence in your show. You just are
No,
hoping
no, no.
people
I'm not going
binge
to judge
watch
it on
it.
that. Like, I like it when shows release their full thing. But I think it goes more to the fact that, like, it just felt unpolished. It, like, I don't want to go after the director, but it does feel like it was poorly directed and that the writing could have been tighter. I again enjoyed Iwan Rheon scene. I enjoyed Anthony Hopkins seeing him up there, but the majority of the show is not those two. If you add
Yeah.
up their time, they might have the most uh, just by themselves individual moments, but overall, like, the story is just so fixed with a bunch of other things. What do you think the average age of a Gladiator was?
Back
Just like,
then? Oh, I know it was really young.
just think like it's basically baseball
I'd
ages.
probably say like 13, right? I
Of
know.
You're insane. It's a 20 to 35 years old.
Well,
They
no,
were
but
not sending 13-year-olds out into
what
the
what
death
I
fields.
remember this from 3rd grade, and this was when 300 had come out. They would sometimes send their kids to school, and their kids wouldn't come back. The life expectancy back then is 79
I said of a
CE.
gladiator. Gladiators
Yeah.
are the fighters. Gladiators are the ones in the pits.
Yeah, but I mean, like, the life expectancy
The
back then
average
was
life of a man in ancient Rome's times was around 40. If that
okay.
helps you,
Yeah,
which
that's
is like 70 now. So, I mean, Anthony Hopkins is just like crazy to be alive back then. Chariot racing was
and
also by far, this is something I learned, more popular in ancient Rome than gladiator fighting.
well, that was what was funny about Anthony Hopkins, going back to the prior point, taking the throne, being that old and taking it, because it's like if you have 3 other emperors who are obviously younger, I mean, like, he's going to be the one that ends up that ends up winning in the end. I don't
Winning?
know.
This
That
isn't an election.
no, I'm saying that he had to defeat the other emperors in order to get the throne.
And he's outlit, like, he's Viserys from the House of the Dragon, or any of the other like old men who have outlasted their time. He's clearly still got a few years left on him, or he's trying, but he's also in preparation mode. It's very successionist in that way. Do you want to hear what the reviews are like?
Sure.
Okay, IndieWire says those about to die. No, we are not entertained. AV Club, Time Decider, all negative reviews. It has a 6.1 on IMDb, a 3 out of 5 from The Guardian. Hollywood Reporter put it as this expensive but frequently cheap looking. A lot of people had problems with the CGI. I have to say, like,
Did you
they
have fun?
filmed in the place that they did Ben-Hur, where they did a bunch of practical effects because they actually built that back then when they did Ben-Hur, and so it was like a real chariot race
Right.
compared to now. And it feels like, why would you film in such an amazing location if you're going to spend 100 days doing like green screen acting? Anthony Hopkins even talked about how he had to, like, this was all him just reacting to a green screen, and it definitely impacts how it comes across.
I guess this is like the 5th show in a row where people have complained about the CGI, and I've already said that I thought that it looked fine. I thought that, like, especially when it came to Kwame's lion hunter scene, maybe I just wasn't looking that closely, but I thought all the animals looked real.
I think they're talking more about the race, and yeah, I don't know. Maybe you've just gotten used to it. It's a complaint that some people take and some people don't. Overall, though, yeah, I would probably give it a 6 out of 10. Just the
So it
extra
does pass for
leeway.
you.
Again, this isn't a pass fail thing for me. It's just meaning that it's just better than the average, because we don't do a lot of what are they called, sand and sandal or whatever, sword and sandal shows. I
I've
can't
never
even
heard of it
remember.
before.
No, like the movies, like Spartacus, the classic movie. It's a sword and sandal. It's that's what the term is, and we just don't get a lot of modern versions of that since things like Spartacus or Rome. And so it's cool to see it coming back and them trying to give it a shot. And I'll probably watch the next episode or two just to see if Iwan Rheon's character takes on more of a leading role. He definitely has the most, I think, potential to, because they could end with him trying to take the crown, but I don't think so. Like, probably not, right?
That seems too Ramsey, like too.
And
too
it's also
much.
based on history, so that it would be kind of crazy if that happened. Anything else you want to say?
No, that's about it.
Oh no, actually, one last thing. Spartacus House of Asher is coming out.
Spartacus
Asher was
House-
one of the, like, the nerdiest or like the most infuriating characters on Spartacus, and he was also in Expanse, the guy who played him. So I looked it up, and the actual actor is also going to be in it. So it must take place years after Spartacus. I thought Starz was done with the series. I thought Starz wasn't making series anymore. But this is crazy. So that's coming out. Gladiator's coming out. This came out. I guess that's really cool.
Well, where detectives was this year, maybe Roman shows or Roman-like shows are next year.
No. They'll find a way to stick some detectives in these shows. In fact, I feel like Taxis or whatever his name is. What do you say?
Scorbus?
No. Scorbus. Scorpus. Tenax is kind of a detective in and of himself, because he's finding the people who screw him over and using detective abilities to find his Scorpus, because remember, Scorpus was also missing that day. Yeah. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.